William Morrison's fingers gently pressed against cold metal, barely visible beneath the shifting sands of a foreign beach. He listened intently, not for the sounds of distant battle, but for the subtle hum of a coiled spring, a deadly mechanism waiting to unleash 11 pounds of pure destruction. In the coming hours, his hands would disarm 47 such devices, a task deemed impossible. This was by standard military procedure, without a single casualty. Morrison grew up with the rhythm of the sea, his life shaped by the rugged coastline. This was the coastline of Portland, Maine. For 3 generations, his family had plied the waters of Casco Bay. They were pulling lobster traps from the depths. William began working the boats at just 13 years old. By 16, he captained his own 3-2-footer. This was a vessel his grandfather built, named Mary Catherine after his mother. The work of a lobsterman is deeply mechanical, a daily communion with spring-loaded doors. It involved finely tuned tension. Each trap, baited with herring, allowed a lobster to push its way in, the doors snapping shut behind it, held fast by a spring. To retrieve the catch, the door had to be opened with absolute precision. Release the spring incorrectly, and it would snap back with enough force to break fingers. Morrison pulled 100 traps a day, 6 days a week, 50 weeks a year. Over 14 years, this amounted to roughly 420,000 individual trap pulls, each one demanding an exquisite touch and an intuitive understanding of a spring's potential energy. His fingers knew precisely how much pressure to apply and how quickly to release. They felt the moment a spring was about to let go. When war engulfed the world, Morrison, then 25, enlisted in the Navy. His experience, he told recruiters, was lobster fishing. He was assigned to the Seabees, the naval construction battalions. They were destined for base building in the Pacific. But Morrison sought more direct engagement, advocating for combat engineering. By early 1944, he found himself in England. His unit was poised for the Normandy invasion. On June 7, D-Day +1, his battalion landed. Their mission was crucial: beach clearance, removing obstacles and mines. This was to ensure vital supply lines could be established. The Germans had heavily mined the beaches, primarily with teller mines. These were anti-tank devices containing 11 pounds of TNT. They were capable of obliterating a truck and causing severe damage within 30 feet. Standard mine clearance protocol was straightforward: locate the mine and mark it. Then call in an explosive ordnance disposal team for remote detonation. This method, while safe, was profoundly slow, taking 20 minutes per mine. This was to set up the charge, run the wire, and reach a safe distance. With thousands of mines scattered across the beaches, this process could consume months. On June 9, Morrison's section faced a formidable challenge. It was a 200-yard stretch of beach containing 47 confirmed mines. Offshore, supply ships laden with ammunition, fuel, and medical provisions waited. Their cargo was urgently needed, and engineers demanded the beach be open by noon. This gave the clearance team just 6 hours, or approximately 8 minutes per mine. Remote detonation was simply not an option. The section chief, facing an impossible deadline, appealed for volunteers to attempt manual diffusing. Teller mines featured pressure-release triggers, designed to detonate not when stepped upon, but when pressure was removed after initial compression. This ensured the blast occurred under a vehicle's belly. The Navy did possess a manual diffusing procedure. Carefully excavate around the mine, then expose the casing, locate the fuse, and slowly unscrew it. One wrong move, one sudden release of the spring, and detonation was instantaneous. Even under ideal conditions, this method consumed 45 minutes per mine. He told his chief he had an idea, explaining the mine's trigger mechanism. It appeared identical to the springs in his lobster traps. The chief, initially incredulous, listened as Morrison described the shared mechanical principle. This involved compressed springs, pressure release, and the absolute necessity of a delicate touch. This was to prevent violent action. He had, Morrison emphasized, diffused 420,000 such springs. This, he argued, was simply a larger version. Skeptical but desperate, the chief authorized Morrison to try one. If it worked, he could continue. If not, they would all know. At 6:15, Morrison approached the first mine, a teller mine partially buried in the sand. He recognized its standard German design, a 1-2-inch diameter steel plate. Brushing sand away, he exposed more of the casing and pressed his ear against it, listening. He could hear the faint, metallic tension of the spring inside. It was precisely like a lobster trap spring under load. He lightly touched the pressure plate, feeling it yield by mere millimeters. The spring was compressed, primed. Any additional weight would trigger it. Removing weight would release it. The art, Morrison knew, lay in releasing it so gradually. This ensured the spring could not build momentum. This exact motion he had performed hundreds of thousands of times, on frigid mornings in Casco Bay, in rough seas, through thick fog. It was muscle memory, etched deep into his hands. He placed both palms on the pressure plate, applying slight, cautious upward pressure. This was not to lift, but to test resistance. The plate moved a fraction. Through his hands, Morrison felt its tension. He slowly increased the upward pressure, further compressing the spring. This effectively took the load off the release mechanism. The goal was for the spring to relax without activating the striker pin. Millimeter by millimeter, he lifted the pressure plate, pausing. He was feeling for the subtle shifts in tension. At 5 millimeters, the spring began to unwind. At 20 millimeters, the pressure plate came free, the spring fully decompressed. Morrison removed the fuse and carried the inert device to the safe pile. The section chief watched, then instructed Morrison to repeat the process. The second mine took 10 minutes, the third 9. By the fourth, Morrison's technique was refined. The key was a combination of listening and feeling. Adapting to each mine's unique characteristics was crucial. Whether new, buried for weeks, affected by salt air, or clogged with sand, just as he had learned to do with varied lobster trap springs. By 8, 12 mines were cleared. 2 men were assigned to assist him, one to mark, one to carry. Morrison worked without pause, each mine a mechanical puzzle he had solved countless times before. At 9:30, he encountered mine number 23, a different challenge. The pressure plate was jammed, sand having locked its mechanism. He couldn't feel the spring. A remote detonation was an option, but time was too critical. Morrison recalled jammed lobster traps, where rocks or seaweed would foul the springs. Force was useless. Gentle persuasion was required. He lightly tapped the mine casing, feeling for vibrations, until the sand shifted and the plate finally moved. The spring engaged, and Morrison diffused it with his established method. By noon, 38 mines had been cleared. The supply ships drew closer, landing craft ready. Morrison, after 9 hours of intense focus, was profoundly exhausted. Every mine had demanded perfect touch. A single miscalculation meant death. Yet, his muscle memory held, his hands performing their intricate dance even as his mind wearied. Mine 47, the deepest, required 20 minutes of digging to expose its casing. Sand constantly collapsed back into the hole. Finally, he reached the pressure plate, listened, felt the stiff tension. This was likely of a new spring. He adjusted his technique and applied more initial pressure to overcome the static friction. He then released gradually. At 15:17, 9 hours and 17 minutes after he began, the final mine was defused. 47 German Teller mines cleared, with 47 successful defusings. There were 0 detonations and 0 casualties. That afternoon, the beach opened, allowing 400 tons of ammunition. This included 60,000 gallons of fuel and critical medical supplies, all because a Maine lobsterman intuitively understood spring mechanisms. The section chief filed a report advocating for Morrison's method. A Navy officer interviewed Morrison, who explained his technique as primarily feel. It was not something easily codified. He believed the skill, built over 14 years of practice, couldn't be taught quickly. Most sailors simply lacked the muscle memory. Morrison continued his work through June and July 1944, personally defusing over 200 German mines. He did manage to train a few sailors with similar backgrounds. A former trawler fisherman from Massachusetts, a crabber from North Carolina. They possessed the innate understanding of spring mechanisms, and together they cleared beach sections that would have otherwise taken weeks. In August, his unit moved to southern France for Operation Dragoon. There, Morrison cleared another 83 mines in 4 days. His quiet reputation spread, and he spent September training other CB battalions. When the war ended in 1945, William Morrison returned to Portland. He bought a new, larger lobster boat, which he named Normandy. He went back to pulling traps in Casco Bay. The work was the same, the spring mechanisms identical, the delicate touch still essential. The skills that had saved hundreds of lives by defusing over 200 German mines, these were once again applied to catching lobsters. He rarely spoke of the war, telling curious customers at the dock. He only said that he had served in the Navy, doing construction work. He never mentioned the mines, nor the pivotal hours on June 9th, 1944, or the profound connection between lobster trap springs and deadly ordnance. Morrison died in 1992 at 75 years old, suffering a heart attack on his boat. This happened while pulling traps. The Coast Guard found him hours later, his hands still on a trap, engaged in one last delicate release of a spring mechanism. His obituary noted his 50 years as a lobsterman and his World War II service. It made no mention of the 47 mines cleared in 9 hours on Normandy Beach. His boat, Normandy, was sold to another fisherman who kept the name. The new owner was unaware of its true meaning, unaware of the quiet hero who had owned it before him, unaware of the unique civilian skill that had dramatically altered the course. This was for a single, crucial day in history. The Navy never formally adopted Morrison's method, deeming it too specialized. It was too reliant on a personal, unteachable feel. Yet, for those critical 9 hours on Normandy, it worked perfectly. A testament to how an ordinary life can forge extraordinary abilities when faced with impossible demands.